At 052 hours, the sun was just beginning to bleed over the horizon of the northern Arabian Sea. To the naked eye, the water was calm, the sky was empty, and the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group was conducting a standard freedom of navigation patrol. But 80 miles to the north, hidden inside the chaotic radar clutter of commercial shipping lanes, a nightmare scenario was unfolding. From the deck of a converted merchant vessel masquerading as a container ship, 11 Shahed 136 suicide drones. Launched in rapid succession, these weren't the clumsy, loud drones of a decade ago. These were loitering munitions, programmed with a swarm algorithm designed to communicate with each other. They didn't fly in a straight line. They wove together in a synchronized web, skimming just 20 feet above the waves, hiding in the sea. Spray zone where traditional radars struggle to distinguish a flying object from a whitecap wave. The Iranian operators watching the telemetry in Tehran believed they had finally cracked the code. They knew the Americans relied on expensive interceptors. They knew a Standard Missile-2 cost $2 million. A Shahed drone cost $20,000. The math was on their side. They were launching $220,000 worth of plastic and explosives to overwhelm a $13 billion aircraft carrier. Their target wasn't just to damage the ship. It was to overload the Aegis combat system, force the Americans to deplete their magazines, and land a humiliating blow on the symbol of U.S. power. As the 11 drones closed the distance, 60 miles, 50 miles, 40 miles, the Iranian command center began to celebrate. Their screens showed green status across the board. The swarm was undetected. The American radio frequencies were silent. They were going to catch the Eisenhower sleeping, but unknown to Tehran, the Eisenhower wasn't sleeping. It was waiting, 22. Minutes before the first drone even left its rail, an E-2D Advanced Hawkeye, the quarterback of the sky, orbiting at 25,000 feet, had detected the electromagnetic signature of the drone controllers powering up. The E-2D's AN/APY-9 radar doesn't just see metal, it sees the disturbance in the air. It sees through the sea clutter. It saw the swarm forming before the drones even organized into their attack formation. The Iranians thought they were sneaking through a back door. In reality, they had walked into a room filled with motion detectors, laser tripwires, and a very awake security guard holding a shotgun. Inside the carrier's Combat Direction Center, CDC, the strike group commander watched the 11 red diamonds on his tactical display. He didn't order a panic turn. He didn't sound general quarters immediately to avoid alerting the enemy that they had been spotted. He let them come. Why? Because he wasn't interested in just shooting down 11 drones. He wanted to trace the data link back to the source. He wanted to know exactly which merchant ship had fired them. At 20 miles out, the swarm crossed the red line. The time for observation was over. The Iranian operators saw their distance to target counter dropping rapidly. 3 minutes to impact. 2 minutes to impact, then the world turned upside down. The lead drone didn't explode. It simply died. Its guidance system fried. Its motor cut. It tumbled into the ocean. Then the second drone veered sharply left, confused, flying directly into the water. The Iranians scrambled to diagnose the failure. They didn't know that the USS Philippine Sea, a Ticonderoga-class cruiser-riding shotgun for the carrier, had activated its SLQ-32 Surface Electronic Warfare Improvement Program, CIWS. This system doesn't fire bullets. It fires concentrated beams of microwave energy. It cooks the electronics of incoming threats like a bag of popcorn in a high-voltage microwave. But 7 drones were shielded, hardened against electronic attack. They pushed through the invisible wall, now just 8 miles from the carrier. They were entering the kinetic zone. The Iranians thought they had survived the worst of it. They were wrong. The electronic warfare was just the polite knock on the door. The FA-18 Super Hornets were the battering ram, 45-09-30, the asymmetric trape. Everyone, John A.G. here. What we are breaking down today is the definition of a bad day at the office for the IRGC. You see, Iran has spent 2 decades building a strategy called asymmetric warfare. The idea is simple: use cheap, numerous weapons to bankrupt and, Overwhelm a technologically superior enemy. On paper, it works. In simulations, it sometimes works. But in the real world, against a fully integrated U.S. carrier strike group, it relies on one fatal assumption, that the U.S. Navy will play fair. The Iranian plan relied on the Eisenhower firing expensive missiles. They wanted to force the U.S. to trade a Ferrari for a go-kart. But the strike group commander decided to change the economic equation. Instead of launching $2 million missiles, he unleashed the gunslingers. 2 FA-18E Super Hornets from VFA 105 had been on combat air patrol overhead. When the electronic warfare took out the first wave, these jets were vectored to intercept the leakers, the 7 drones that survived. Usually a fighter jet engages a target from 20 miles away. But shooting a drone with a radar-guided missile is tricky. They have small radar cross-sections and generate very little heat. So the pilots did something old school. They went to guns. The M61A2 Vulcan cannon in the nose of a Super Hornet fires 20mm rounds at a rate of 6,000 rounds per minute. It sounds like a chainsaw tearing through the sky. To the Iranian operators, the video feeds from the surviving drones suddenly showed a shadow passing overhead at 400 knots. Then, chaos. Drone 4 disintegrated in mid-air. Drone 5 lost its right wing and spiraled into the sea. Drone 6 was cut in half. The pilots were treating this like target practice. They weren't wasting taxpayer money on missiles. They were using bullets that cost $20 apiece to destroy sophisticated Iranian hardware. The economic advantage Iran thought they had, it just evaporated. But the swarm was designed with redundancy. While the Hornets were shredding the formation, 3 drones broke off and dove to wave-top level, 5 feet above the water. They accelerated to maximum speed, heading straight for the carrier's hull. These were the killers. They were programmed to ignore electronic jamming. They were too low for the jets to safely engage with guns without risking splashing into the ocean. They were 3 miles out, 45 seconds to impact. On the bridge of the Eisenhower, the lookouts could physically see the incoming specks. The alarm finally blared throughout the ship. Inbound vampires, port quarter, brace for shock. The Iranians watching the feed saw the gray hull of the carrier growing larger. 2 miles, 1 mile. They thought they had done it. They thought they had proven that the U.S. Navy was vulnerable. They forgot about the phalanx. The wall of lead, the phalanx. Close-in weapon system, CIWS, is the last line of defense. It's an autonomous robot armed with a 20mm Gatling gun and its own search and track radar. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't need a human to aim it. If it sees something moving fast towards the ship, it kills it. And the Eisenhower had 3 of them. At 0.8 miles, the phalanx mount spun up. The sound is distinctive. A high-pitched electronic whine followed by a low guttural roar. Brrrt! Tungsten penetrator rounds filled the airspace in front of the drones. This isn't sniping, this is creating a keep-out zone of metal. The lead drone flew into the stream of tracers. It didn't just explode, it vaporized. The kinetic energy of 20mm rounds hitting a fiberglass drone at Mach 3, combined speed turned it into confetti. The second drone tried to jink left, the phalanx tracking. Radar adjusted instantly. The stream of fire walked into the drone's flight path. Splash 2. The final drone, the 11th one, managed to get through the debris field. It was 400 yards out. This is point-blank range in naval warfare. It was aiming for the flight deck, hoping to hit a parked jet and start a chain reaction. Fire. This is the moment where history holds its breath. But the Eisenhower is a floating fortress. As the phalanx tracked the final target, a RIM 116 rolling airframe missile, RAM, launched from the sponson launcher. The RAM is a heat-seeking, supersonic interceptor designed specifically for this nightmare scenario. It left the rail with a flash. Less than 2 seconds later, it met the 11th drone, 150 yards from the ship. The explosion rocked the port side of the carrier, not from an impact, but from the shock wave of the interception. Shrapnel rained down on the ocean, harmlessly. 11. Drones launched. 11 drones destroyed. 0 hits on the ship. Total elapsed time since detection, 16 minutes. But the engagement wasn't over. Remember what I said earlier? The strike group commander wasn't just interested in defense. He wanted to know who fired them. While the phalanx was chewing up the drones, the E-2D Hawkeye had finished triangulating the control signal. They had the location, a nondescript cargo ship 80 miles north, drifting in international waters, trying to blend in with commercial traffic. The merchant vessel had stopped transmitting. They were trying to go dark, hoping the Americans would be too busy fighting the swarm to notice where it came from. They were wrong. The 18-minute response, the rules of engagement, ROE, usually require a lot of phone calls to Washington before a counterstrike. But under the new self-defense of the strike group protocols, a commander has the authority to neutralize the source of an active attack immediately. The captain of the Eisenhower looked at the tactical plot. Source confirmed? Confirmed, sir. Signal origin matches the launch profile. End it. 2 FA-18s were already in the air, the same ones that had just used their guns on the drones. They were low on gun ammo, but their wings were still heavy. They carried the AGM-84K SLAM-ER, Standoff Land Attack Missile, Expanded Response. It's a precision cruise missile that can be guided by the pilot. The pilot's banked hard to the north. Wildcat 1-1 committing to target. Music on. On the merchant ship, the IRGC crew was frantically trying to disassemble the launch rails and hide them below deck. They had seen the drone feeds cut to static. They knew the attack had failed. Now panic was setting in. They needed to blend in. They needed to look like a civilian ship delivering refrigerators to Dubai, but they couldn't hide the heat signature of the rocket boosters they had just fired. To the targeting pod of the Super Hornet, the ship's deck was glowing like a Christmas tree. At 05:29 hours, exactly 17 minutes after the first drone launch, the lead Hornet released a single SLAM-ER. The missile dropped, its engine ignited, and it accelerated to high subsonic speed. It didn't aim for the bridge. It didn't aim for the engine room. The pilot guided it using the infrared seeker directly onto the mid-deck, right where the remaining drone canisters were stacked. The impact was surgical. The missile didn't sink. The ship. The U.S. Navy isn't in the business of creating environmental disasters with oil spills if they can help it. Instead, the warhead detonated inside the container stack housing the drone command center. The secondary explosions were spectacular. The remaining Shahed drones stored on board cooked off, blowing the disguised shipping containers apart. The launch capability of the vessel was gutted in a fraction of a second. The IRGC crew wasn't swimming, but their mission was dead. Their expensive control equipment was slag. Their cover was blown. At 05:30 hours, 18 minutes into the engagement, the radio call went back to the Eisenhower. Splash target. Secondary explosions observed. Threat neutralized. The aftermath. The sun was fully up now. The smoke from the burning. Containers on the horizon was the only sign that a battle had taken place. 11 Iranian drones. Destroyed. 1 IRGC command vessel, neutered. American casualties, 0. American missiles expended, 1 RAM, 1 SLAM-ER. Cost to U.S. Navy, a few $1,000s in jet fuel and 20mm rounds. Cost to Iran, millions in hardware and an embarrassment on the global stage. Tehran went silent. There were no press releases. No footage of the heroic strike on state TV because there was nothing to show but static screens and a burning boat. This 18-minute encounter proved something that war planners have been debating for years. Can a carrier strike group handle a swarm? The answer is yes. Iran tried to overwhelm the system with numbers. The U.S. Navy responded with integration. They used electronic warfare to blind them, fighter jets to thin the herd, and close-in defenses to catch the leakers. It was a symphony of violence conducted perfectly. The scary part for Iran isn't that the attack failed. It's how easily it was swatted aside. The Eisenhower didn't even have to maneuver. It didn't have to launch its entire air wing. It swatted 11 drones like a man swatting flies at a picnic, and then calmly burned the hive. The USS Eisenhower continued its patrol. The deck crew reloaded the phalanx, the pilots landed, refueled, and were ready to go again in 30 minutes. The message was clear. You can try to swarm us. You can try to overwhelm us, but you better bring more than 11 drones, and you better be ready for what comes back at you. If you think this swarm defense was insane, wait until you see what happens when a U.S. submarine gets cornered. That story is even wilder. Click this video right here to watch it. I'm John A.G. See you in the next one.